You're listening to the No Schedule Man podcast with Kevin Bulmer, exploring real stories and lessons learned with a variety of special guests. To learn more about Kevin and to access other episodes of the podcast, please visit noscheduleman.com and connect and contribute at No Schedule Man on Twitter or Instagram and on Facebook, YouTube, and SoundCloud, all /No Schedule Man. Thanks for listening and enjoy the No Schedule Man podcast.
I've been known to struggle with reality, not that it is any real mystery.
Hi, I'm Kevin Bulmer. Thank you for joining me and welcome to the show. I hope that you're able to take away something positive from it and that it adds a little something to your day. I'm glad that you're here. I'd love to know how you came to find the show. Drop me a note on any of my social media channels. Those are all easy to access. They're listed on the upper right-hand corner at noscheduleman.com. You can also hop on our email list there. We've got some free stuff to give you just for coming along, including an MP3 copy of one of my songs called Deja Vu, which is the song that closes every episode of this podcast. So you'll hear a clip of it right at the very end. That's from a CD I put out in 2014 called Solo, The Return of No Schedule Man. There's a bit of a story about that up on the website under Kevin's Music if you want to hear it. Speaking of music, that's pretty much the theme of this episode. So I thought I'd mention now, because I don't think I've ever even acknowledged that the music that, and I'm probably the only one who cares about this, but the music that opens the show is a clip of another of my songs called Bilge Rat Blues. It's also on that same CD called Solo, The Return of No Schedule Man. And I picked that song specifically both because it's upbeat and because of the message in it. And like the other one that I just mentioned, you can hear Bilge Rat Blues in its entirety and see the lyrics if you go under the Kevin's Music tab up at noscheduleman.com. All my songs that I've released there on CDs are listed, and you can listen to them and you can read the lyrics. But Bilge Rat Blues, you can only hear part of it at the beginning of the podcast where it says, I've been known to struggle with reality. Not that it's any real mystery. I just don't have the time for the stupidity, and yet you see it everywhere. And then part of it that you can't hear where it says, maybe it could have been my destiny to live a life out upon the open sea. You can go ahead and tell me that's a fantasy. I'll tell you I don't really care. Now, I'm smiling to myself thinking about that because I wrote that song at the time that I'm recording this. It would have been, 13 or 14 years ago, long before I ever really understood what a limiting belief was and the power to choose the way that you want to think and see the world and shape your own experience, which is kind of funny to me because that's essentially what Bilge Rat Blues is all about. Don't let the bilge rats don't get you down. All of the noise that's always barraging us from all different angles. And if you've got something that you know resonates with your heart and your essence, go after it and don't let somebody else knock you off course. As long as you're not running dead over top of other people. You know, you want to treat people well, but you want to be true to yourself. Bilge Rat Blues, that's what that's about. A card-carrying member of that club would have to be today's guest, Jeff Boudreau of Jeff's Musical Car, the embodiment of somebody who, like me, loves music. It had an idea, one that when I heard of it, I thought, holy cow, that's got a lot of potential stumbling blocks to hold it up. He must have thought of some of those himself, didn't let any of them get in his way, and created something really, really neat, which I'll talk about in just a second. I'm all for anybody who expresses and encourages creativity. I love that. I think it's really hard to feel down, depressed, blue when you're in a creative state. The flip side to that is that when you are down, and we all take our turns with that, with what life throws at us, it is difficult to get back into the creative state. But I don't know, my experience has shown me that something along the lines of creativity, for me anyway, those are the things that just keep bubbling back up, the memories that I have that are the deepest and that mean the most to me, and that no matter how life changes, people that come and go, jobs and career changes, and even moving houses and relationships coming and going and things like that, there are certain things that continue to be the heartbeat, the essence of who I perceive me to be as a person, as a spirit, as an essence. And it all has to do with what I connect to creatively. So I say that just as a means of encouraging you to maybe think about that for yourself, or what are some of the things where you really feel locked in, where time just seems to absolutely either stand still or fly all at the same time. because you're just locked in that creative state. It could be any number of things. It doesn't have to be writing songs or writing journal entries or poetry or books or blogs or painting pictures or taking pictures. It could be every thought is a creation. Every conversation that you have is a creation. If you think about it, the conversation and the feeling that goes around it can go any number of different ways, just depending on what you create and what you contribute to it. How you contribute to your community, the way that you arrange furniture in your house, why you choose the meals that you choose to make, and all of this is creative. So give that some thought. I encourage you. But when I first heard about a guy who was reaching out to musicians and then asking them if they would sit in the back seat of his car and then conduct a little mini interview and then perform a song on video while he drove them around, that got my attention. That is a creative idea. And that essentially describes what is and has become Jeff's musical car, which is an ongoing project now, created by and produced by Jeff Boudreau, today's guest. Jeff is out in Moncton in the province of New Brunswick here in Canada. Now, when I first watched some of Jeff's videos of Jeff's musical car, I was filled with questions. I immediately wondered, where did the idea come from? What did he have to do to get it started? How long did it even take him to get ready to do it? How did the artists, the musicians, initially react when he was asking them if they would perform in his car while they drove him around? I wondered, how does he get some of the more established artists to agree to do it? What are some of the questions that they have? What are some of the, not demands that they have, but if somebody called me and I didn't have any context and they said, hey, Kevin, can you, or would you be interested in just having me drive you around and I'm going to take a video of it and interview you and you're going to sing me a song? Actually, now that I hear that out loud, I think, yeah, that actually sounds like fun. But that's the point, and I'm also tainted by the fact that I know Jeff a little bit now and know about the musical car. But I wondered, how does he know exactly where to drive? How does he limit the noise from outside the car? Like, you don't want to be going over train tracks or through construction zones or by the fire station or something like that in case a fire truck comes out. How does he capture the video and the audio footage? Well, we discussed all of that and a whole lot more. Some of the key things that came out of my discussion, or at least that resonated with me, that I encourage you to listen for from the journey of Jeff's musical car, are, number one, the gratification that comes from pursuing an idea and allowing yourself to figure it out and get better as you go. This comes up so many times in this podcast where I know, I'll use myself as an example. There are so many things that I stopped myself from doing because I didn't think that they would be perfect and I would be ashamed to share them. And I can look back now and see on how much I missed out on in terms of the experience by maybe not even getting started. But if you're onto something that sparks your spirit, don't let those unanswered questions hold you back. As Jeff puts it, there's no guidebook on how to record bands in vehicles. So what he did, he created his own guidebook. So back to what I was talking about, living true to yourself, like the Bilge Rat Blues. Don't let them get you down. Don't let yourself stop you either. You'll find the answers, but sometimes you've got to just jump into the deep end of the pool to find out how strong a swimmer that you are. Number two, the value of building relationships and the power of networking. As long as you do that with patience and good intentions. Jeff gives some terrific examples of, well, answering some of the questions that I had of how does he connect with some of the more established artists, and how does he find enough people to be able to do one of these episodes on his YouTube channel at Jeff's Musical Car pretty much every single week. He gives some pretty considered answers to that and some stuff that I hadn't necessarily thought of. As soon as he mentioned some of the events that he was attending and people that he was talking to, I thought, yeah, that makes total sense. That's the value of building relationships and being patient and being persistent and treating people right, because they can tell if you're coming from a good place or not, and Jeff is. Number three, expressing and encouraging creativity is its own reward. It almost never fails, and it's the value of real connection in the human experience. So trying new things and having fun and getting creative, when you do that, you meet new people and you experience new things, and then you're almost in spite of yourself, you're building up a book of stories that when you look back, you have this whole volume of, oh, I can't believe we did that. stories to tell with when people like me call and ask if you'll be on their podcast. When you trust that people are generally good and you want the best for each other, that's when some of the real magic happens, and you find out that people, for the most part, are pretty good. Sometimes the media tries to tell us different, but just be careful about what you pay your attention to. I know there's a lot of bad in the world, but there's a lot of really good stuff going on too. There are a lot of really cool people. In fact, I think most people are really good. Listen for the story that Jeff tells about him driving a musician named Jen Grant around and why they had to go to his house and then back to the venue. It's a really good example and evidence of what I just talked about. That and so many other great lessons about exploring your creativity and the rewards that come with that are all coming up. This is my conversation with Jeff Boudreau, exploring the creative journey behind Jeff's musical car on the No Schedule Man podcast. Jeff, before we get into talking about the specifics of the musical car and that whole project, I'd like to talk a little bit more specifically about you for a minute. Where did your interest in music come from?
Well, I mean, I've always loved music. It was my passion from when I was a child. I remember learning to play guitar back when Nirvana was big. I got a Nirvana guitar tab book and started learning music, and then I got more into Green Day, that kind of thing. And back in high school, had a punk band. We played a few shows here and there, and then the interest never went away. But I went away to college to study video and television, but I always kind of aimed to use music in some capacity in whatever I did.
Green Day was a band I was slow to adopt. I'm guessing I'm guessing you're a little younger than I am. I'm 42, and Green Day was one of the bands that helped destroy my favorite band. Have you ever heard of Extreme?
Yep.
Yeah, they were my favorite. And then in the early to mid 90s, Green Day and Nirvana and some of those that they came and took over. And then it was an Extreme fan years later that told me I should go listen to Green Day's most recent masterpiece. This was in around 2009 or so. That was 21st Century Breakdown. And I've been a Green Day fan ever since. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, they're two different worlds for sure. I don't think I would put Extreme and Green Day on a mixtape.
It depends, but now I've kind of got us off the beaten path here because they've both done a lot of different work. Has Green Day ever been to Moncton and received well, Nirvana obviously hasn't. Maybe former pieces of them have, but has Green Day ever been to Moncton and received an invitation to do an acoustic set in the musical car?
No, I believe they were here a long time ago, like before I even lived in Moncton. And there's actually rumors that they played a show and got naked and that they weren't allowed to come back. That's kind of what I heard through people. I don't know the truth in that, but there might be something online about that.
You might have to get them in the car and find out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, although you might have to run that video on 7-second delay in case the legend turns out to be true and happens again. You were telling me a few minutes before we started the conversation that in addition to your interest in music, your background also includes the television industry. What more can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I've been working for community TV for about 16 years. Absolutely love it. I've always had that kind of creative side to me, so I got into working in television, and I've had the opportunity through that experience to branch off into other things, like on my own doing music videos, that kind of thing. So was it the editing and post-production end of it? The more, I'm trying to think of the way to phrase this. Was that the area that you were most interested in? Yeah, I also liked just writing. I remember when I was when I was in college, we used to have to just come up with these little skits to video, like for projects, and just sitting there and writing ideas down was one of my favorite things.
So we've got an established interest in the television medium, in video, and editing, and writing, and clearly with music. Where did the initial seeds of the idea for what became the musical car, where did that come from?
Well, I like what I do at work, but I always enjoyed having my own thing on the side. Like whenever I get home, I've dabbled in a few different ideas for projects that I could do just in the summer on my own time in the evenings. I've done like little comedy videos and different kind of music montages, and then over the years, I kind of got into musical car by mistake. I was driving around with my son, who was probably around 4 or 5 years old at the time, and he was in the back seat, and I had my GoPro camera facing out like a dash cam. I used to just drive around like whenever there was a lightning storm or something and just kind of hit record and see if I could capture anything or whatever. And there was a Ramones song that came on, and then he started singing along and dancing, so I decided to switch the camera inward to take video of him doing it. And I don't know the exact moment when it happened, but whenever I was looking at the footage, I just had the idea that wouldn't it be cool if someone went in the back seat and played some music, and I guess the seed was planted there.
Let me see if I've got this straight. So the camera was pointed, like, effectively, Jeff, out the dash. I think you mentioned that in case there was a thunderstorm or something. So the GoPro was looking forward. It was then that you turned it back into the car once your son was singing the Ramones song. Have I got that right?
Exactly, yeah.
What Ramones song was it? I have to ask.
I Want to Be Sedated. You got to start them young.
I only wish... Now we're going to sound like a couple parents, but I wish I had video of, all the songs that my kids used to sing. My oldest son at the time that we're recording this is just about to turn 14. He'd probably be horrified to see some of the footage, which is probably from an old high 8-tape camera that's just turned backwards and sitting on the armrest between the two front seats of him singing along with Jimmy Buffett songs 1 minute and then Disney songs the next. I remember the one song by Sheryl Crow that was part of the Cars movie soundtrack. I think it was called Real Gone. He used to do that over and over and over again, but nothing so cool as the Ramones. I'm impressed.
I actually still have that video online somewhere. I don't think I posted it on my Just Musical Car channel, but I do have a video of basically the birth of musical car.
Well, I was just going to go there because that my same son, I've got two of them, but the one I was referring to, he's asked me a few times, when can I come on your podcast, Dad? And I said, let me get it a little bit more established so it doesn't seem like too much of a novelty party trick. And then maybe we'll look at it. But what would be the circumstance where you might bring your son or another relative or somebody like that into the musical car?
There's actually one episode where I couldn't get a sitter, so he actually sat in the back seat.
Oh, really?
He was in his car seat. It was kind of like when he was younger, like the really like baby seat, like not the booster, but like the one where you kind of get strapped in and everything.
Yeah.
And I had basic, and it's kind of weird. Like I don't know how this day happened, but I had just purchased a new vehicle that day because my original musical car was finished. And I had a shoot booked with a band called Kashka from Ontario. So I really wanted to do the shoot. So I basically drove the car off the lot, took all my GoPro things, and I'm like sticking like Velcro and adhesives all over the vehicle, getting my stuff set up. Went downtown, picked them up, did the shoot, and he basically sat there and played on his iPad while they did their performance.
Were they affected to any degree about not wanting to be too loud or...
No, not really.
Yeah, they were cool about it.
I kind of angled the camera where you barely see him, but in the corner, if you're looking, you can definitely see him in the side. What? He was, for a 3-year-old, he was very well behaved.
I'm just looking at a list of the episodes in your website while we're talking. Which one did you say that was?
Kashka. Kashka, I think.
Do you have even a loose idea of the episode number or around where it was?
I don't know. The best bet would probably be just type Kashka, Just Musical Car on YouTube.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking, I'll make sure that I post that when we post this podcast. Yeah. Well, I see it. I think I see it. All capital letters, K-A-S.
Yeah.
H-K-A. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Episode 88, right between Christine C. and St. David.
Okay.
Just to take you back into the time machine here.
Yeah.
Although
it's kind of weird when I hear some of those names. It seems like so long ago, but
Well,
I guess it's my 4th year.
And I'm wondering if one kind of bleeds into the other, because after a while it's kind of like getting onto the hamster wheel when you're creating something on a regular basis, isn't it? Is that you almost don't have time to enjoy the celebration. That's not the word that I want, but of that just that sense of satisfaction of having completed something, because you're already on to that self-imposed deadline of getting the next one done, right?
Well, 1 a week isn't too much of a pain to me, to be honest. Like I've been doing it so long that I can basically start to finish cut one of those in about 2 hours, I'd say. And that's like syncing everything up, tweaking the audio, cutting like from front cam to back cam, exporting and uploading it. So,
well, and then you're also at the mercy of having musicians available, right?
Mm-hmm. Which doesn't tend to be a problem.
Let's go back to where that started. So the first episode, when you first got this musical car idea, tell me what the process was like of getting who ended up being Crystal Kirk, if she was even the first one you asked, getting them to agree to come and do this. How did that all work out from concept to the first few episodes? What happened?
Well, I'm trying to remember, but I believe back when I started, I had a conversation with Crystal around the time that I had done that video with my son, and I had gone to school with her, so I'm a good friend with her. And we started chatting, and she was talking to me about how she was living in Ontario for a while, and then when she came back to New Brunswick, she was having a hard time kind of getting immersed into the local Moncton music scene. And basically, like, you put a live video on YouTube, and you're competing with like a million other videos of a cell phone filming someone on stage. So I kind of right there said, like, you want to do something a bit unique that might get a bit more views? And she was totally up for it. And that's when I started thinking, okay, how am I going to do this now? I had the idea, but the logistics of how I was going to get everything set up and what kind of microphones I needed, and even like graphics and getting an intro, it kind of just started from there. And I think it took me about 5 months from the time I had the idea to when I actually released it.
So let me phrase it this way. How far forward had you thought it out? Meaning, to what extent were you thinking of the musical car being something that was going to be ongoing as opposed to maybe just an episode here and there? Back at that time anyway, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, that summer, it was kind of weird, but I think it was summer 2012. I really believed in this project, and I didn't want to rush it. I kind of just felt like this could work. So I really wanted to take my time. So I kind of researched what I would use equipment-wise. Then I guess the next step was figuring out the look, how I was going to put it together with graphics and the theme song, which was kind of funny because my cousin has a recording studio. So I had asked him, can I just go and record a quick theme song for a YouTube series? And he's like, sure. So I'm there in my kitchen jotting down words an hour before. And I'm like, okay, that should work. And then it just became quite popular. I get a lot of comments on the theme song and how catchy it is. And it's actually become kind of a cool thing because every 100 episodes I release, I get a new band to re-record my theme song. So that's kind of like an ongoing thing.
I was going to ask about the evolution, not just of the theme song, but of the graphics around it as well. So we'll do the theme song first. So you wrote you wrote the theme song?
Yeah. And
then who was the first to re-record it?
I think the first one was John Arsenault. I had done a video with him and another musician, Stephen LeBlanc, and we kind of collaborated. So I did some video work for them, and in exchange, they helped me do the recording. So that was kind of the more rocky, in-your-face kind of version.
Yep.
And most recently is the Town Heroes, the band from Cape Breton. They did more of a softer, eloquent version. So I'm not sure where I'm going next, but I have a few ideas of who I could get to record it. So
I'm wondering
we'll see.
if the those folks that are the most recent that you mentioned are the ones is the one that I'm thinking of. That almost the first time I heard it, I thought it was what's the guy's name from the Bare Naked Ladies? Is it Ed Robertson? Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was him at first. Just the tone of the voice.
Kind of has that. I can see that.
Yeah. So, well, that's neat. So, and then the graphics, where because now some of this is starting to come together for me, because right from the very first episode, it doesn't look like a video that was just sort of tossed up onto YouTube. So now that you fill it, and that's a compliment. Because there are just different things like there's one shot where the car is coming down the street for whatever reason. I'm mindful of that. There's a Subway store on the side of the frame, because when in a later incarnation of it, when it's sort of stylized, it's almost sort of cartoonized. I know that's not really a word.
That was just like an After Effects kind of thing I did.
Yeah,
to change it up.
I noticed the Subway thing in there too, but the car like literally drives up and over top of the camera. And the graphics at the very end of the first few episodes, where there's the double yellow line in the middle of it, and the camera's kind of, it's a cool animation where it's sort of jumping from credit to credit. How much of that did you do on your own?
I did quite a bit of it in After Effects. I was using some templates I'd purchased on some different sites, and you can kind of just customize it the way you want. So.
And then every now and then you just kind of give it a fresh coat of paint, sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually going to be doing something with the drone most recently, and it just never came to be. But I'm sure whenever I get the new theme song for like episodes 300 on, I'll probably get an idea of like how to shoot something that goes with the new music.
Jeff's musical drone. You just gave me an idea. You could have a Jeff's musical car festival. And then the drone goes over top of it. Boy, could you even imagine?
I'd be all over that.
It doesn't sound like you need help coming up with any more ideas, Jeff. So back to where we were when you got started, the first episode with Crystal Kirk, who you knew for a while. How many of those episodes, the initial ones, did you record, at least the in-car portion of, how many of them did you record in advance before you started releasing them?
Actually, I think I had reached out to a few people, and I probably only had 2 episodes like ready. I wasn't really sure if I was going to do weekly or monthly, but I think it was like maybe 2 or 3. And that's when I got my first radio interview with CBC. And then after that, it was kind of like the media just all jumped on it. So the following week, I did interviews with Global, with CTV, like pretty much everyone. And after that point, that's when people started contacting me, and it just kind of like snowballed from there.
How many episodes in were you when you started doing those interviews? Just a couple?
Probably only 3 or 4 in, yeah.
Really? How did they find out about you?
Just from internet sharing, I think Facebook and stuff like that. It probably just got seen by the right person, and someone said, hey, you got to check this out. And
you got to see what this dude in Moncton, New Brunswick is doing, huh?
Yeah, it doesn't take long for something to get around on the internet, that's for sure.
How long was it before you went to more than one camera in the car?
I think I started on the 3rd or 4th episode. It wasn't too long. I think it was only one camera for maybe the first 2.
And how do you draw the audio from it? And there's a reason why I'm asking this, but I'm going to let you answer that one. So the ones that you're doing now, where does the sort of the main audio feed come from?
I have 2 external mics that I basically just stick on Velcro, and I just stick them in the car.
I ask that for 2 reasons. One is because the sound quality, I've thought, for all of the ones I've seen, has been exceptional, which you want it to be, obviously, with music. And I remember being surprised at the first one that I watched that there wasn't more noise from outside. not to get ahead of us, because I want to ask about some of these kinds of things. Sooner or later you're bound to, to get a fire truck go by or something like that. But the sound is terrific. But what I did notice when I went all the way back to the beginning, Jeff, and rewatched the very first episode with Crystal, it was sort of jarring to me to look all the way back and to see how the camera is all, like, you're in the whole frame, whereas now you're there at the beginning, but then it's just the artist. And the other thing I noticed is that when you went to turn, you could hear the turn clicker, click, 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 click. Well,
that's something I learned.
Yeah, well, and I'm not trying to criticize as much as I want to point out to people that do have a creative idea, there's no way to know unless you go and do it, and then the way sort of shows itself to you. How fair an assessment is that of your experience as well?
Oh, it's totally true. There's no guidebook on how to record bands and vehicles. I think I'd be the pioneer of actually writing this book. So there's a few things I learned right away. First was the turn signals, which I tend to just kind of drive where I don't need to turn a lot. And if I do use it, I kind of know when I can. Like, if there's a full band in there, I can use it and you're not going to hear it because they're just going to overpower it. Another thing I learned is you have to take the slowest route possible, because when you're going fast, or if you'd be on a highway, you're just going to get too much road noise and wind noise. And the last thing that was like totally key to learning was driving on snow is loud, because you get a lot of low end when you're driving on crunchy snow and ice and stuff. So what I tend to do is I pre-shoot a lot of my episodes in the fall, and then I just kind of run them throughout the winter as long as I can, because right now I'm basically covered until March, so that saves me a little bit of the pressure of driving on clean roads in the winter.
What about day versus night? I've noticed that too. There aren't a lot of nighttime ones, which I'm guessing is advantageous as far as lighting is concerned.
Yeah, there is a few I had to do at nighttime, and I just basically used these little LED lights I got at the dollar store, which sometimes it works out good, but it's really hard for me to position and really do it properly because these cameras are just auto iris, so you can't like brighten it or darken it. Like, if it's overexposed, when I get back, I'm only going to know when I'm editing, so it's kind of a chance you take, but I do try to do most of them in the day, which does get tricky in the winter when it gets dark at 5 o'clock.
And how many cars have there been now?
Just 2.
I thought there were only a couple. Now, granted, I haven't watched them all. By the time at the time that you and I are recording this,
well, Kashka was the switchover, so from there on,
it's been the same car since then.
Yeah.
Can I ask you what kind of a car it is?
It started off as a car, then I ended up switching to an SUV. So Just Musical sport utility vehicle wasn't as sexy, so I decided just to keep it as Just Musical car.
Because it seems it's difficult to tell from the interior, but it seems like a fairly small car, which I think adds to its charm. To me, it's part of the point. Like, I was showing some to my kids, and the son that I was talking to you about just a few minutes ago, and going back I was actually showing him the one when you had the two fellows from the Trews in there, because they're one of my absolute favorites. And his eyes just got wide. He's like, how did he do that? How did he get them to do that? And I said, well, you're going to have to listen to the podcast so that you can find out. But he says, it's just a little car. Like, how do they even have room for both guitars? And I would think that's part of the fun of it, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I find the ones where I have 4 or 5 people squished in there are the ones that people tend to watch more, just because they want to see, like, how are they going to do this?
Well,
start throwing in some violins and cajones and different kind of instruments, and you basically have to be pretty creative how you do that.
There are 2 immediately that come to mind for me when you say that. One is when you had the group Blackjack Billy.
Yeah.
And another is when Sherman Downey and the Ambiguous Case. Whenever
sure.
It's the whole back seat and somebody in the front seat, then that poses a couple of different challenges for you, I'm guessing, where both you're going to have to cut a little bit more between the 2 cameras. And how much does that affect the mixing of the audio at the end of it?
Not really. I have one mic in the back and one in the front, like for when I'm talking. So I just kind of like ride the mics. If there's someone in the front that has like, just say like a violin that's going to be really loud, I'll just bring mic 2 down and keep mic 1 in the back a little louder. So I do have a little bit of play with the audio.
How far into it was it, Jeff, that you started reaching out to people that you didn't know to ask them to be in the car?
It didn't take me very long. I'd say by episode 5, I just started firing off emails because I was still pretty involved in the local music scene, even through my work. We had done a few local music programs, so I definitely had connections, but there was definitely some hesitation at first. People weren't so sure about it, and I think the first like real big artist that I got probably just happened by mistake because she didn't know what it really was Jen Grant. I had booked an interview with her manager, and then I had met her at the venue, and I'm like, oh, I'm here to do the interview. And she's like, okay, do you want to like do it in the back or sitting down here? And I'm like, no, you're going to play a song in my car. And she's like, what? So I had no clue. So she didn't even have her acoustic guitar. So I said, okay, how about we go to my place? I'll get my guitar, and then we'll just do the song back, and you'll be back in time for sound check. And like, she was totally game for it. So that was pretty cool.
That's cool. Most people that are creative like that, I think at their core are up for something creative, wouldn't you say? Although every now and then, I guess you'd run across somebody that just had to have things absolutely a certain way. Mm-hmm. Can you think of a time where maybe that happened and got in the way, or maybe an episode that didn't happen that was supposed to?
Well, I mean, there's always certain musicians that are a bit self-conscious about themselves, and when you're doing a performance in the back seat, it's very raw. So if you're not hitting your notes in the right key, you don't have distortion behind you to cover it up, or just like the ambience of a loud live set. So you really have to be confident in your performance and couple that in with hitting bumps in the road. So there are people that have basically said, like, I'm just not really comfortable doing that, and I get it. But I guess it's just a chance. Like I always tell people, I'm not going to release this unless it's good. If it's going to make you look bad, I'm not going to release it. And I've held true to that. I think there's a few where I sent them a message and just politely told them I don't think we should run this, and they're totally okay with it. So,
well, what's best for you is best for them as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you finally, I'm just giggling thinking about the story that you told to Jen Grant. Where do you want to do the interview? You're going to sing a song in my car.
It was funny because when I was driving to my house at one point, she said, like, are we almost there? I think she was starting to wonder, like, okay, I was at the venue. Now I'm in this stranger's car. We're on the highway. Like, what's going on here?
Well, that's kind of...
She was like texting. She was texting her husband. I'm sure she was like giving directions, like, okay, we just crossed Mountain Road. Okay, now we're going. Just in case. But I wasn't a serial killer, so it all worked out.
Well, it's good. This isn't really what I intended the podcast to be about, was having serial killers on. I'd kind of hoped to avoid that and let somebody else tackle that niche. So everything's going along just swimmingly. But it's funny how things are different from certainly when I was younger, where the thought of just, of an artist just jumping into some guy's car, I say with due respect, Jeff, and then allowing him to drive them around. You think about in the age of Uber and all this kind of stuff, and Kijiji selling, of just going to somebody's house. And
yeah.
It's interesting because on one hand, and I'm taking us on a bit of a tangent here, but on one hand, we've never been more sensitive about the potential dangers of certain situations that we might be getting into. And on the other hand, I might also argue that we've never been more open to just trying new things and having fun and just creating experiences that are real by sharing time with people that have mutual interests. And I've got to think that your natural sense of passion about the music industry and sense of creativity and all of that. I think for the most part, how fair do you think it would be to say, Jeff, that comes across, or at least at the beginning stages before you were really established, that was coming across to people, that they just got the sense, you know what, he's coming from a good place, and this is going to be a good thing to do.
I always used my television background to kind of put them at ease. I would contact them and say, hi, I work at a local TV station, and I've been involved in broadcasting for many years. I have this side project I started, and I think just that kind of like lets them know that I'm in the industry kind of thing. So it kind of puts them a little bit more at ease.
As it began to evolve, how did I'm going to call it the booking process evolve? Some of the artists that you have sort of graduated yourself up to, and I don't mean to say that to diminish any of the local people from Moncton that have been on at all, but just to suggest that I'm just guessing, and I may be wrong, and that's why I'm asking the question, Jeff, that some of the more well-known artists, there must have been some sort of a process to go through a publicist or an agent. What are some examples where something like that was true, and what did you do?
Well, I'll use the Trews for an example. That was one that I basically, from doing musical car and going to the ECMAs, I made some contacts, and I ended up talking to someone who was close with the band, and they put me in touch with the manager, and then it just kind of happened through that. And there's other big ones that just kind of happened on their own. Fred Penner would be an example of that. I was hosting a folk festival, and one of my friends, Kelly, that was promoting the event and putting it on, she had put me in touch with him, and he said, sure, I'll do that. And it just kind of happened. Like, it was easy as that. I didn't have to go through an agent or company or anything. So I guess there's the gamut of ones where it ends up being like a phone tag thing, and I'm talking to people for 2 months and setting up times. And then there's the other ones that just kind of happen like easy as that.
You're having to work ahead then, it sounds like to me, where you're doing some of this networking and setting up, but a fundamental part of making this work, unless I'm missing something, is that those artists have to be in the same town where you are at some point. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
So
and that's how I do it, is I look at local venue pages and I say, okay, this is the list of people I want to contact. This is who's coming to Moncton in February. Here's who's coming in March. I'll fire off 25 emails, and if I get 4 back, like, there's my 4 shoots.
How many, or who would be some examples of some artists that, and I want to maybe be careful how I don't want to paint you in a corner, so I want to be careful how I'm asking that question, because I don't want to reflect poorly on anybody that maybe has not gotten back to you. But maybe I'll ask it this way, Jeff, is to what extent have you maybe reached out to some certain artists, just trying to build that connection in the hopes that they may someday come through and perform in Moncton, and you'll be able to catch them when you do?
Well, I'll give you an example of one I was really excited to do, and I got bounced around so many times. I ended up getting a guy in Toronto, and then I got a publicist from LA, and it was for Sum 41. They were playing in Moncton, and I just had the feeling that I was like really close to nailing this one down, and that was around the time when Derek had been really sick and he had to cancel the tour, so it didn't come through. But I kind of felt like that one was pretty close. I had to do a lot of convincing, and then in the end they just said that they wouldn't be able to, and then it came out later that the tour was canceled. So
this one, I mean, the format naturally lends itself toward acoustic or a cappella performance. But you've just mentioned Sum 41, and when we started the conversation, you talked about Nirvana and Green Day. So clearly you've got some rock and roll in your DNA. But how much more of a hesitation is there for an actual band? Like I mentioned Black Jack Billy and Sherman Downey in The Ambiguous Case. Now, they don't have a whole drum kit in there, but when you've got 3 or 4 different people, you can make a pretty good amount of noise. It is different though, and I'm wondering, is there a hesitation, or how much hesitation might there be by actual bands that might be concerned that their songs might not translate as well in the kind of environment that you described earlier?
Yeah, I'm sure that happens. I do reach out to a lot of rock bands, but it's kind of a thing that a lot of bands, like even metal bands and punk bands, like they'll go to radio shows and play an acoustic version of a song.
Yeah.
I think everyone kind of has that acoustic song that they can get out that works. This upcoming month for Musical Car is actually kind of one of my more rock months, kind of rock goes acoustic. I have Black City Avenger, which is a punk band from Halifax, and let me see. I better go get my list. So I have a list on my fridge with all my upcoming acts, so I always know. Oh, and I have Double Experience. They're a rock band that has kind of a video game theme to all their music, so that was a fun one to do. And I also have Bloody Diamonds, who are a female-fronted metal band from Ontario. So,
how often have you had people reach out to you, asking you if they can be in the car?
It happens quite often, actually. I think one of the hardest parts of doing this, to be honest, is when someone reaches out and I really want to help them, but I just don't think their music's there, because I have to find that balance of supporting local acts but keeping my credibility up so I can get those big acts too.
Can you think of an example, Jeff, of a time that, or maybe of an artist that you had in the car that you maybe didn't really know about previously, but because of that experience and then discovering them through that, you've since become a fan of?
Oh, there's lots. It's kind of funny because I just accumulated this huge pile of CDs from bands, but the first one that comes to mind for me is Sarah McDougall. I had done a shoot with her and another good artist, Ben Kunder, and I'd bought CDs from both of them, but for some reason Sarah's just really resonated with me, and I've listened to that album. I almost know every word to it now. So before I'd done that shoot, I had no idea who she was, and now I'm a big fan.
What about from people like me that, and I'm happy to come up next time I'm in Moncton, I'll bring my guitar and I'll ask you if I can, we don't ever have to release it. We can do an acoustic rendition if I want to be sedated and bring both of our sons along.
Yes. That'd be beauty.
But for somebody that discovers you through when they follow an artist, and I don't think I had told you, for me, the first video that I saw of Jeff's musical car was of David Francey. He had posted that, and so I went and watched it, and I thought, what in the world is going on? And then looked around, I thought, well, who else has he had there? And then I was delighted to see Fortunate Ones is another of my absolute favorites. Sherman Downey I've already mentioned. The Trews I've already mentioned. There are a handful of others, but those are the ones that I initially was really intrigued about. And I I remember thinking, like what my son said, how did he do this? But what are, from people like me that have that experience, that are introduced to the artists and then come and watch the videos, what are some of the things that you hear from them when they leave you a message on YouTube or maybe send you an email or a tweet or something?
From artists or people like fans of the show?
Fans.
Well, actually, I see it quite often. And the thing about Twitter that's great is you can be copied on like someone commenting a band if they tag your name. So one of my favorite things to see is I discovered you through Jeff's musical car. I love you guys. Like, I can't wait till you're in my town. Like, that's pretty much like why I do this. And when I see bands being discovered because of my video, like, it totally makes my 2 hours of editing worth it right there.
Oh, see, now you're talking about the other side of what I was just describing. That's even better. What you're saying is you've got your own base of fans that subscribe and follow and check in on the videos of Jeff's musical car, and they come across all sorts of artists that they've never heard of before because they're following you. So you're creating fans of the bands.
But I do see it on the other end too. Like, as soon as a band posts it on their social media, I kind of keep an eye on it. One I did with Natalie McMaster, and there was a lot of comments like, wow, I'd never heard about this show. What a cool idea. Like, it's definitely fun to read positive comments like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Natalie's been around a while. I remember when I started my radio career in Sarnia, Ontario, and introduced Natalie at a place called the Dow People Place. I don't know if it's still called the same thing, but that would have been around 99, 2000. So she's been out there and making incredible music. Had a great career for a long time. So some of these people like Natalie, I mean, they're respected internationally at what they do. For sure. Well, that's it's got to be part of the fun for you, is that where 1 minute you've got somebody that's known across the world for her craft like Natalie is, and then the next minute somebody that's really just maybe trying to break into the music scene right there in Moncton. But creativity is creativity, right, Jeff? That it sounds to me like you're tapping into that same spirit, and you're just as jazzed for one as you are for the other.
Yeah, I am, and I think it's really a shame sometimes because there's these songs that really are special to me, and I'll look back on them and rewatch them, and they only have like 120 views, and like their fan base is like under 500 people. So it kind of like saddens me that like some people really end up getting that lucky break, and other ones that I personally think have a lot of talent and really put a lot of emotion and talent into their songwriting will never get noticed. I guess it's been like that since the dawn of time, but when you do a video every week, you really see how much talent there is in your own backyard.
Have you ever thought about putting or featuring yourself in the car? What about singing the theme song to Jeff's musical car in Jeff's musical car?
I actually did one with Francey Maria Band. At the end, we did the theme song. And there's actually an episode where I play guitar. It's for a woman that I was friends with. Her band was called Madison Rivers, and I was guitar in her band for a couple months. So I got one of my buddies that's a radio host locally, and he drove, and I played guitar. So that was a bit of a different one.
It sounds like it would have been a lot of fun. Let's talk about some of the experiences while you're out on the road. There's one of the you've already partially answered, or maybe even mostly answered, one of the questions that I had before we started the conversation, which was, how do you even decide where it is that you're going to go? Like, is it always an established route, or does that depend on, on the venue?
Mostly, I choose Main Street because it's slow, and you can basically get 6 minutes of driving going 30 kilometers an hour, which doesn't get any better than that. I do shoots in other cities. Every once in a while, I'll go to Halifax and just like do a whole bunch, which was kind of funny because I'm at home on MapQuest trying to figure out like a good route so I don't get myself lost because I had no idea where I was going. So I basically just found a nice little route that basically is 8 minutes long, and I did it for a whole afternoon. I booked bands at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, basically on the hour, and I just basically covered almost my whole winter just in 2 days of shooting, which I totally did like on my own money. I drove to Halifax, got a hotel, went through a tank of gas, and then drove back just because I love this.
I'm going to go away from the road situation thread for a second and come back to with what you were just saying. I mean, what do you get out of this, Jeff?
Well, I think if you're a music fan, just being able to have experiences. Like, to me, it's about experiences. How many people can say they picked up the Trews at the airport, grabbed a coffee with them, and then drove them to their hotel? Like, it's just the experiences and the people I've met. I'm a firm believer that if you just keep doing something and building it up, like, good things will happen. So I've never been concerned about like, I got to make money off this. I have a job. I'm good there. This is my hobby and my passion. So I'm going to keep doing it and building my fan base. And maybe one day, I don't know, I might get a car sponsorship. I might get a billboard. I don't know. We'll see.
What was the time that you that you left it, or after you'd had the artist in the car and you'd driven around, they'd done their song, you dropped them back off, or maybe it was even after that the fact, and you were looking the back at the video, or probably a combination of all of that, Jeff, a time that you just really felt that jazz kind of deep in your gut that made you feel, I can't even believe that just happened. That was so cool. When was a feeling like that?
Actually, I think Blackjack Billy was one of those. Like, it was like such a fun interview. They were like totally into it. They played awesome, and I don't know, like, just sometimes it works. I remember when I started, it was a lot trickier to kind of like build that magic, because a lot of the bands that I was interviewing were really new, and they had like no social media that I could research, and the interviews were just like a struggle for me because I knew nothing about them. But as I started getting deeper into what I was doing, then I was able to read bios, get press kits, and prepare myself more. And I think that was another one of those kind of growth things that happened, the evolution, I guess, of my hosting abilities from start to finish was being able to do a bit more research and just be more comfortable with the guests. How
did you decide on the format? Because I always assumed that it was just the window of availability that you might have with a certain artist, and maybe that was part of it. But when you're talking about setting up the interview and whatnot, like for instance, this podcast typically is on or about an hour long. Yours is typically between 5 and 10 minutes, I would say. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did you, what were the factors that went into deciding on the format of, getting in the car, doing a really kind of quick setup interview, letting them do the song, and then the wrap up? What was the thought process behind that?
I just think it's just an attention span thing. People tend to like short videos on YouTube. I didn't really see someone sitting down for half an hour for a 3 or 4 song set on their cell phone. So I just wanted something that people could be on the bus or waiting for their kids at the school bus, that they could just put the video on and spend, like you said, 5 to 10 minutes, hear a song, and if you like them, great, and if not, then it's done anyway. So I guess it was just about the timing. It just seemed like internet short videos works. That's kind of what I came across.
Who are some people that you haven't had in the car yet that you'd really like to, or that you think would be a good fit? I've got a name in mind of a Canadian musician, and I'm curious to see if they might be part of your answer. I'll tell you who it is either way, but who might be an example of somebody that you think would be a fit that hasn't been in there yet for whatever reason?
I've tried for City and Color. I really would like to get that set up. Also, I can't even think of the name now. Okay, I'll skip on that one, but there's been a few, but Canadian-wise, I'd say like City and Color would probably be one of my must-haves, just because like the acoustic thing couldn't get any better than that.
If you've had this guy in, I've missed it. Have you had Alan Doyle in there yet?
No, but he actually follows me on Twitter, so I think he likes what I do.
Well, if he
comes to town, I'll definitely have to book that.
He's the one that's just rattling in my mind that I just, talking to you and getting a sense of the whole spirit of it, and the other people that you've had in there, and so many of that East Coast brethren that you've had in there as well. He seems to me to be the kind of person that would just come and completely take the spirit of it, swing the car all the way around the city. Yeah. But I don't know. It was just a thought. It's funny. His was the name that immediately came to mind.
No, that's for sure. That's a good one.
Okay, so let's go back to where we were a few minutes ago, and in the car, because we've talked about the audio and where you drive, and when in the time since you and I started communicating, and since between then and our discussion now, I've been a little bit more mindful, Jeff, of what my experience is while I'm in my own car, and thinking about how easy it is to come across another car comes up next to you and is booming the bass, and it's rattling my windows.
Yeah.
Or an ambulance goes by, or train tracks, or the list goes on and on.
I have examples of all those things.
It would tell me a couple of stories of some stuff while you're out there, because this is it looks all polished and well produced by the time it hits your YouTube channel. But there have got to be some times where, I don't know, an artist got in the middle of the song and something happened. What comes to mind?
Well, it's kind of funny because out of 100 and I don't know what I'm at, 255 videos, there may only be like 2 or 3, honestly, that I had to stop mid-set. Every other video was like, welcome to Just Musical Car, blah, 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 straight through, no edits. So I'm pretty happy about that. But there has been times when you can catch things, and I'll name a few if you want to look them up after. But I think it was Regal Beagle Band. I had done a shoot with them, and there was an ambulance that goes by, and they just played right through it like pros. So they kind of like smirked as it was going by. But oddly enough, it didn't really happen a whole lot. I think maybe 2 times. There's been a few times when I end up in spring or summer when there's heavy road construction, and I had done a shoot with Ben and Sarah, and I ended up going down this street that was just like so bumpy, and I felt terrible. And then coincidentally, one of my batteries had died, and I had to rebook them for the next day. So luckily I was able to kind of redo that one and take a different route. So that one kind of saved itself. Yeah, there's always times when there's distractions, people running out in front of the car, like not at crosswalks, but I'm always looking straight ahead anyway. So there hasn't really been anything I'd call a close call. There's a video I did with Daniel Allard, and right at the end, I'm doing my sign off, and someone like runs a red light, and on the video, I just said, that guy just ran the red light. And then it ends like that. So there are a few kind of things like that. There's one episode I did with a band called Magnetic Lane where we had sparklers in the back. I gave them sparklers and they lit them up. So we're like driving around Main Street with sparklers out the window, and we had just drove past a cop car, and they said, I think that was a cop car. I'm like, oh no, we're good. Don't worry.
How often do people recognize the car, or that there's something going on inside it? And maybe, especially when you're at a stoplight, and there are people in the back of the car, or do they even pass?
Less now.
Yeah?
Because there's a tint on the windows in the back, but with my old car, when I had the Grand Am, like, it was very obvious. And it was smaller too, so like half the time they would have their hands next to the guitars out the window. 60 LPs is a fun one. They're just like half of his arm is out the window, and he's even like commenting, like as people are walking by, he's just like, hey guys, how you doing? So it's kind of cool to see like that interaction part of it too.
I'm going to have to listen back to this before I post it, Jeff, so I can make notes of all these, because I want to post everyone that we've put an automatic link. Well, of course, the easiest thing to do is to go to your YouTube channel and find them there, but it looks like 60 LPs was episode 48 from the list on your website. But it's not like, the car is like, the Dukes of Hazzard car or the A-Team's van or anything like that, or the DeLorean from Back to the Future.
There's no decals or anything.
No, so it's not as if it's like it's going down the main street and people are all turning and go, hey, there goes Jeff's musical car. Hey, because you don't really want that, right? You want people to leave you alone, and you want it to be quiet so the artist can do their song. Exactly.
There's been a few times when I actually set up my stuff in other bands' tour vans if they wanted to fit more people than I can fit. So I always enjoy those ones. You get kind of a different scenery. One that was like super fun was a band called the Steady Swagger from Quebec, Montreal, I believe. And they had a full drum kit, like electric instruments with amps, drum kit, everything. Stand-up bass. I think I had tinnitus in my ears for a week after that because the drum kit was right behind my head. Oh. And every time he hit the cymbal, it was like literally like 3 inches from my head. It was so loud. It was ridiculous. We're going down Main Street, full drum kit, electric guitar, stand-up bass. It was nuts. That's kind of one of those must-watches too, I think.
What do you have to do to adjust for the audio to record that so that you just don't overdrive it to death?
There's an auto limiter, so once it kind of gets its level, it's not going to let it peak, which was something I looked for in a microphone. So I'm always covered there. So I mean, I can't have a sound guy in the trunk like doing audio. So
Well, yeah, that's kind of my point. If you're going to be driving around with a full band, and even that would be an easy thing to get wrong. But with an auto limiter completely makes sense. Is you just set it the wrong or forget about it, and even somebody in there with just an acoustic guitar, you can once you overdrive the audio, you can't fix that. But as I mentioned, the audio has always been spot on. So clearly, you know what you're doing. But I'm wondering about how the process has evolved for you and how, if at all, it's any easier now that you've got 250 some odd episodes and at the time that you and I are recording this. So now that you've got that whole body of work to be able to refer back to when you are reaching out to the Cities and Colors and the Sum 41s of the world, how much easier does it make it to be able to refer back and go, here's who all else I've had do this?
that's exactly it. The more high level artists you do, you're building up your portfolio and you're building your credibility. So what I usually do is, if I'm going to do an interview request for, I don't know, like even like someone like Shania Twain, for example, I'm going to break out my best country artists and say, like, here's some examples of what I did. Or if I'm going to do a rock band, like the Trews for sure, because they're going to know the name. So it makes it easier. And also the connections I've made in the industry. I have a few people from like Sony Canada and from Halifax Spin Count, and they send me like press releases all the time whenever bands are in Moncton. So whenever you get to that level, it definitely makes your job easier. And also working in television helps too, because I've gotten a few press releases where they sent it to my work, and then I just reply and say, well, we don't really have anything at my work, but I do have this side project. And I nailed a few interviews that way. I think Jesse Cook was a really high level one too, international award-winning guitarist. That was a pretty high level one too.
Yeah, I was just watching that one the other day. He's unbelievable. I was thinking while I was watching that, how in the world does Jeff concentrate on what he's doing with something like that going on in the back seat?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be the guy that crashes and breaks his hand and then ruins his show too. Like, there is that little pressure in the back of your head where you still have this touring artist that this is their life and their money, and not even if it wouldn't be your fault, I'd feel terrible if anything ever happened, like where an artist got injured or something like that. So
I never even.
I guess
thought
on Main Street, when you're driving 30 kilometers an hour, you're pretty safe, but.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. Has that been a stumbling block for anybody that was either afraid of that or insurance issues or anything of that sort?
I have a feeling with big bands, that's the biggest thing. I remember when I was trying to get Billy Talent, I even told them, like, even if you guys want to do it like in your bus in the parking lot, like, let's just set it up. So when there's a really big artist, I'll kind of give them a few options just in case there is that uneasiness of kind of going in a stranger's car and driving around kind of thing.
Yeah. That's the more I think about it, the more there are, potential logistics, but the more cool it makes it for everybody that's shared the time and the experience. Because I'm sure that they're going back to whatever they're doing as well and thinking, I've toured, especially the mid or higher level acts that are on the road a lot, and waking up in a different city every single day. I bet they can't say that they've done a whole lot of interviews and performed in a lot of other moving vehicles. So you're you're giving something back to them.
It gives them kind of like that break in their tour where you're kind of doing like walk on stage, play 15 songs, walk off stage, rinse, repeat kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, tomorrow we're doing that thing. We're going to play in a car. Like, that's kind of cool.
It sounds to me like even after all this time, you're still really enjoying it and that you have aspirations of some things that you'd like to do. But what do you have in mind at the time that we're having this conversation, Jeff, of where you see this and yourself going in the next little while?
I guess the dream always is to keep raising the bar and bringing it to another level. Like, just I'd love to be that guy that if there's a big band playing at the casino or at our Coliseum, like I'll get a phone call or an email like, hey, we're in town. Can we set up a shoot? Like I want to get to that level where there isn't that game where I have to convince people where they're just going to know a few of the videos I've done with some high level artists and want to be a part of it. So I guess that's kind of the goal for me.
Well,
just meeting people and getting like some one-on-one time and really a private performance 2 feet behind you in your vehicle. Like there's no more intimate performance that can happen besides that.
Did you say it's been about 4 years you've been doing this?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
As of right now. So I think it's really important, and I really appreciate that you took the time to share all these stories, Jeff, because there are so many of us that, gosh, you fall prey to this idea of instant gratification and everything's got to be right now. And a big part of what seems to be coming from the conversations that I'm enjoying being a part of on this podcast and that I'm discovering by talking to people like you is that, the journey really is the destination, as cliche as that sounds, that you had talked about all of the great experiences that you've had, that even though you still are aspiring to keep going and have goals that you're shooting for, it also sounds to me like if you were to stop right now, you have collected an incredible amount of experiences that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't just followed that initial idea and just got started and then tuned on it from there.
Exactly. It doesn't get any better than that. And it's kind of like a fuzzy area too, because people are always like saying like, why don't you monetize? And I just don't want to get into legal disputes of like, you don't own the music. And it just seems a lot easier for me to just do this for fun and for experiences than try to make a living off it. Because to be honest, you need millions and millions and millions of views to even start breaking into the hundreds and thousands. So to me, it's not worth the headache of getting lawyers and people saying they want their videos taken down because of copyright claims. I've had no issues. I put every video up, no ads. It's just click it, watch it, and subscribe. That's kind of the payment.
I've had copyright claims on my own podcast that have my own music in it.
Yeah.
So I can only just imagine what it would be like by trying to do that when you've got different artists in every single one. I think you're taking the right approach. Oh, Jeff, before we go, I just thought of one other thing that I wanted to make sure that I asked you. What about an example of a time where you had an artist in the car that was relatively unknown at that time, that after the fact, not necessarily because of being in the musical car, but after the fact went on to have some larger success?
Yeah. The best example I have is actually my most viewed video. Last summer, I had done a video with an artist from Alberta called Danny O, and he was touring with another guy named Coulter Wall, who wasn't playing at the festival that I was attending, but he was tagging along, and he said, hey, my buddy's here too. You think you could do a shoot with him? He's a musician. I said, sure. Like, I hadn't heard anything about him, had no bio. We just kind of winged it and wung it. I don't know, winged it. Anyway, we just kind of went with it, and it got kind of a good response, and I love the song. And then something happened. He ended up, I don't know how this happened, but Stone Cold Steve Austin ended up finding his music in Alberta. So he had tweeted, you have to check out Coulter Wall, like, this kid's awesome. And then boom, like, his career skyrocketed. He's been talking with people in Nashville, getting some pretty hefty contracts, and his video is my most viewed video, and it's kind of crazy. Like, I think this kid's going to really make it big. He was only 20 years old when I did the video, and he just has this really old soul kind of feel to him with his country music. So I think this is one that could be my big break in a way in 5 or 6 years.
Coulter Wall. So we have to have keep an eye on him, huh?
Yeah, keep an eye on him for sure.
Well, for whatever it's worth, now we've had an opportunity to make this connection, and we never would have been able to do this and then share your story with whoever comes across this podcast in the coming weeks and months and years if you hadn't have pursued that creativity and that idea to begin with. And I applaud you for it, Jeff. I think it's great. We need more people like you, and I hope that this will encourage some other people to act on that crazy little idea they have rattling around in the back of their brain. And who knows, maybe 4 years later they'll have done 250 some odd videos.
Exactly.
Like you have. But continued success and safe driving, and wishing you all the guests that you want, and ambulance and accident-free rides. Thanks so much for the time, Jeff.
Thanks to you too as well.
To learn more about Jeff and to connect with him, visit him online at jeffsmusicalcar.com. Now, Jeff is Jeff, and there's no apostrophe in the web URL or the social handle. So jeffsmusicalcar.com. His YouTube channel, which is pretty much the main hub, you can find all the episodes there. Jeff's Musical Car on YouTube. At Twitter, that's his handle, at Jeff's Musical Car. And on Facebook, yeah, you can see this one coming, right? Facebook.com/Jeff's Musical Car. Toss him a like up on Facebook. Leave him a comment on any of those social channels. And what would be really cool is if you could reference one of the artists from one of his episodes or one of the ones that we mentioned in here, or maybe hashtag it I want to be sedated in honor of how it all started with the story that he told about his son in the backseat of the car. Fun stuff. You can reach me at kevinbulmer.com. NoScheduleMan.com will take you to the same place. All my social channel links are up there, as is the sign up for our email list. I'd love for you to join me on this journey and would be happy to hear from you. For something a little bit more succinct, I invite you to join me on my YouTube channel as well. We've got about 6 months worth of weekly video blogs up there at the time that I'm recording this one. Really, I feel like we're just getting started with that. All the podcast episodes are posted there too at youtube.com/NoScheduleMan. And if you're there now listening to this, please click subscribe and let me know you're there. Until next time, remember, no plan is all part of the plan. Sometimes you just gotta let go. I'll see you next week when we explore another journey on the No Schedule Man podcast.
Just a little deja vu.